After the age of 60, sleep often stops behaving the way it once did. Nights become lighter, awakenings more frequent, and rest less predictable. Yet this is not the body breaking down. It is the brain quietly reorganizing its priorities, shifting how it balances alertness, safety, and recovery, and inviting us to understand sleep not as something we lose with age, but as something that changes its language and asks to be supported in a different way. Sleep after 60 is often described as a decline, but biologically it is more accurate to describe it as an adaptation. The body is not malfunctioning. It is responding to decades of experience, changing priorities, and altered risk assessment. From an evolutionary standpoint, aging did not evolve around comfort alone. It evolved around survival, awareness, and continuity of the group. As the brain ages, it subtly recalibrates how deeply it is willing to disengage from the environment, especially during the night. In younger years, deep sleep dominates the night. The brain willingly disconnects because the body is focused on growth, repair, and learning. High levels of deep sleep support tissue regeneration, memory formation, and physical development. As these priorities lessen with age, the brain reallocates resources. It does not abandon sleep, but it lightens it. Lighter sleep allows quicker responsiveness to internal signals such as discomfort, breathing changes, or blood sugar fluctuations, and external signals such as noise or movement. This shift is deeply rooted in the nervous system. With age, the balance between the calming parasympathetic system and the alert sympathetic system changes. The sympathetic system becomes slightly more dominant, not because of anxiety, but because the brain values vigilance more highly. Older adults historically served as protectors, decision-makers, and early warning systems within social groups. Light, fragmented sleep supported this role. What feels inconvenient today once carried survival value. Brain chemistry also evolves. Neurotransmitters that promote deep sleep gradually decrease, while those associated with alertness and sensory processing remain relatively stable. This does not mean the brain cannot sleep deeply, but it does mean that deeper sleep now requires more precise conditions. The margin for disruption becomes smaller. Minor stress, irregular timing, or environmental noise can easily tip the balance toward wakefulness. Circadian rhythms also change with age. The internal clock that regulates sleep and wake cycles begins to advance. This explains why many people over 60 feel sleepy earlier in the evening and wake earlier in the morning. This shift is not random. It reflects changes in how the brain processes light and darkness. Aging eyes transmit less light to the brain, altering signals that regulate sleep hormones. As a result, the timing of sleep-related chemical release shifts forward. Importantly, this change does not mean total sleep need disappears. The body still requires rest, memory consolidation, and immune regulation. What changes is how that rest is distributed. Sleep becomes more segmented. Short awakenings appear between sleep cycles. These awakenings are not always pathological. Often, they are the brain briefly checking internal conditions before allowing sleep to resume. The problem arises when modern expectations collide with ancient biology. Many older adults judge their sleep by younger standards, expecting long, uninterrupted nights. When that does not occur, frustration builds. That frustration activates stress pathways, increasing cortisol and further lightening sleep. The issue becomes less about biology and more about interpretation. The body responds to perceived threat, even if that threat is the belief that something is wrong. Sleep after 60 becomes more sensitive to emotional context. Unresolved worries, loneliness, or cognitive stimulation close to bedtime are processed more strongly by the aging brain. The filtering systems that once ignored minor concerns now treat them as relevant. This is not weakness. It is heightened relevance detection. The brain assumes that if something captures attention, it may matter. Physical comfort also plays a larger role. Joint stiffness, temperature sensitivity, and changes in bladder signaling can interrupt sleep more easily. These are not separate problems. They are signals competing for the brain's attention. When the brain is already lighter in sleep, it responds to these signals more readily. This adaptation explains why sleep aids often feel less effective over time. They attempt to force depth without addressing the underlying shift in brain priorities. The aging brain resists being pushed into deep unconsciousness if it does not perceive the environment as fully safe. Trust, not sedation, becomes the limiting factor. Understanding this removes blame from the body. Sleep has not been taken away. It has been reshaped. The goal is no longer to recreate youthful sleep, but to support the version of sleep the aging brain is willing to offer. This support comes through consistency, calm, predictability, and respect for the brain's changing logic. When older adults stop fighting the change and begin working with it, sleep often improves in quality even if quantity remains different. Lighter sleep can still be restorative when it is not constantly interrupted by stress or confusion. The body adapts best when it feels understood rather than judged. Sleep after 60 reflects wisdom at the cellular and neurological level. The brain is prioritizing awareness, safety, and balance over complete disengagement. When this shift is recognized as intentional rather than defective, the relationship with sleep softens. The body no longer needs to defend itself against frustration. In that softened state, sleep often deepens naturally, not because it is demanded, but because the conditions finally align with what the aging nervous system needs to let go just enough to rest. As the body moves beyond 60, sleep is increasingly shaped by hormones that no longer follow the same rhythms they once did. These shifts are gradual and often subtle, but their effects are deeply felt at night. Hormones are not just chemical messengers. They are timekeepers, signaling when to rest, when to wake, and how deeply the brain is willing to disengage from the world. With age, this timing system is recalibrated, not broken. Melatonin is often at the center of the discussion, and for good reason. In younger years, melatonin rises sharply in the evening, creating a strong biological pull towards sleep. After 60, melatonin secretion tends to decrease in both intensity and duration. The signal to sleep becomes quieter and begins earlier in the evening. This is why many older adults feel sleepy sooner than they once did, and why staying awake late often leads to restlessness rather than deeper sleep later. The body is not confused. It is following a shifted signal. At the same time, cortisol, the hormone associated with alertness and readiness, often changes its rhythm. In younger adults, cortisol rises closer to morning, preparing the body to wake. With age, this rise may occur earlier, sometimes in the very early hours of the morning. The result is a pattern many people recognize. Falling asleep without much trouble, then waking too early with a sense of alertness or mental activity. This is not anxiety in itself. It is biology signaling that the day has begun earlier than expected. These hormonal changes reflect how the aging brain values predictability. The body becomes more sensitive to disruptions in timing. Irregular bedtimes, inconsistent meal schedules, or variable light exposure can amplify hormonal misalignment. What once felt flexible now feels destabilizing. The endocrine system prefers regular cues, and when those cues are inconsistent, sleep becomes fragmented. Sex hormones also influence sleep in later life. Changes in estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone alter temperature regulation, muscle relaxation, and nervous system tone. Even subtle shifts can affect how easily the body settles into rest. Nighttime warmth, sudden awakenings, or a sense of internal restlessness often have hormonal roots. These experiences are not random. They are expressions of a body adjusting to a new internal balance. Hormones interact closely with the circadian clock, the internal timing mechanism housed deep within the brain. This clock relies heavily on light signals, particularly morning light, to set the rhythm for the entire day. Aging eyes transmit less light to the brain, weakening this signal. As a result, the circadian clock drifts earlier and becomes less precise. Without strong anchors, sleep timing becomes more fragile. This fragility explains why small interventions can have large effects. Exposure to natural daylight early in the day can strengthen circadian alignment. Dimming lights in the evening can support melatonin release. These actions work not because they are dramatic, but because the hormonal system has become more responsive to environmental cues. Hormonal shifts also affect how sleep is structured. Deep sleep stages become shorter, while lighter stages become more prominent. This does not mean sleep is less valuable. Lighter sleep still supports immune function, emotional processing, and memory integration. The aging brain simply distributes these functions differently across the night. Stress hormones deserve special attention. The stress response becomes more easily activated with age, not because life is necessarily more stressful, but because recovery from stress takes longer. Evening worry, even mild, can elevate cortisol enough to interfere with sleep onset or continuity. The brain interprets unresolved thoughts as unfinished business, keeping alertness slightly elevated. This is why calming evening routines become increasingly important. They help lower cortisol gradually, signaling to the brain that vigilance is no longer required. Without this transition, the hormonal system remains caught between day and night, resulting in shallow or disrupted sleep. Metabolic hormones also play a role. Blood sugar regulation becomes less stable with age, and nighttime fluctuations can trigger awakenings. The brain is highly sensitive to drops in glucose and will wake the body to restore balance. This is not a sleep disorder. It is a protective mechanism. Regular meals and stable nutrition patterns during the day help reduce these nighttime disturbances. Understanding these hormonal changes shifts the focus away from blame. Sleep is not failing because of weak will or aging alone. It is responding to a new internal environment that requires different support. The goal becomes alignment rather than control. When hormonal rhythms are respected, sleep often improves in subtle but meaningful ways. Falling asleep may feel more natural. Early awakenings may soften. Rest may feel deeper even if it is shorter. These improvements come not from forcing sleep to behave as it once did, but from creating conditions that match the body's current hormonal language. Sleep after 60 is shaped by hormones that speak more softly and earlier than before. When we learn to listen to those signals and respond with consistency and care, sleep becomes less of a struggle and more of a conversation that continues to evolve with the body rather than against it. As the nervous system ages, its relationship with sleep becomes more sensitive, not weaker, and this sensitivity explains why deeper rest now depends so strongly on signals of safety. The nervous system is the body's threat detection network, constantly scanning both the external environment and the internal state for anything that might require attention. In younger years, this system is more tolerant of noise, stress, irregularity, and discomfort. It assumes resilience. With age, that assumption changes. The nervous system becomes more conservative, not because it is failing, but because it has learned through experience that recovery takes longer and that disturbances carry greater cost. As a result, it requires clearer reassurance before it allows the brain to fully disengage into deep sleep. This is why sleep after 60 can feel lighter and more fragile. The nervous system is no longer willing to let go unless it feels confident that the environment is stable and the body is safe. Safety in this context is not just the absence of danger. It is the presence of predictability. Irregular schedules, late-night stimulation, emotional uncertainty, and physical discomfort all register as low-level threats. Each one may seem minor, but together they keep the nervous system partially activated. This activation is subtle, often below conscious awareness, yet powerful enough to fragment sleep. The brain may fall asleep, but it does not fully surrender. It stays slightly alert, ready to respond. This is why awakenings occur without clear cause. The nervous system is checking in, ensuring that nothing has changed. As people age, internal sensations become louder signals. Joint stiffness, digestive activity, changes in breathing, and bladder sensations are interpreted more readily by the brain. In deep sleep, these signals are usually filtered out. In lighter sleep, they are not. The nervous system prioritizes awareness of the body's internal state, especially when it perceives vulnerability. This does not mean something is wrong. It means the system is protective. Emotional safety plays an equally important role. Unresolved worries, loneliness, or even anticipation can keep the nervous system engaged. The aging brain processes emotional information differently. It places greater weight on unresolved concerns, especially at night when distractions are removed. Thoughts that once passed easily now feel more significant. This mental activity is not overthinking. It is vigilance. The nervous system is attempting to maintain control in the absence of certainty. When people try to force sleep in this state, the effort itself becomes another signal of threat. Frustration activates stress pathways. The body interprets urgency as danger. Sleep becomes even more elusive. What the nervous system needs instead is permission to relax, and permission comes from consistent cues that nothing requires immediate response. Routine is one of the strongest safety signals available. Regular sleep and wake times tell the nervous system what to expect. Predictable evening rituals create a gradual descent from alertness to rest. When these cues are repeated daily, the nervous system begins to trust them. Trust reduces vigilance. Light exposure also influences perceived safety. Bright artificial light late in the evening signals daytime conditions, confusing the brain's sense of timing. Dimmer light allows the nervous system to shift into a more receptive state. Temperature matters as well. A slightly cooler environment supports the physiological drop in core temperature that signals readiness for sleep. Warmth can be comforting, but excessive warmth keeps the nervous system alert. Sound and silence carry meaning too. Sudden noises trigger threat responses, while consistent background sounds can feel reassuring. Silence is not always calming if the nervous system associates it with isolation. Gentle, familiar sounds can provide a sense of presence and continuity. Physical comfort sends direct safety signals. Supportive bedding, comfortable positioning, and reduced pain remove reasons for the nervous system to stay alert. When discomfort persists, the brain remains engaged, monitoring the body. Addressing comfort is not indulgence. It is communication. The nervous system also responds to how the day was spent. Gentle, meaningful activity during daylight hours reassures the body that it is capable and engaged. Excessive inactivity can increase restlessness, while excessive exertion can prolong alertness. The nervous system seeks balance. It wants evidence that the body was used appropriately and that recovery is now justified. Breathing patterns influence nervous system tone directly. Slow, steady breathing activates calming pathways that signal safety. Shallow or irregular breathing maintains alertness. This is why calm breathing before bed can have such a profound effect. It speaks directly to the nervous system in a language it understands. Nutrition contributes quietly to this sense of safety. Large meals late at night activate digestion, keeping the body engaged. Hunger, on the other hand, signals scarcity. Both can disrupt rest. Balanced, predictable eating patterns reassure the nervous system that energy availability is stable. Over time, when these signals align, the nervous system begins to soften. Sleep deepens not because it is commanded, but because the conditions finally allow it. The brain releases its grip gradually, cycle by cycle, night by night. Sleep after 60 becomes less about achieving unconsciousness and more about creating an environment in which the nervous system feels safe enough to step back. When safety becomes consistent, depth returns in its own way, shaped by age, experience, and the body's evolving priorities rather than by force or expectation. Movement becomes one of the most reliable anchors for sleep as the body ages because it speaks directly to the systems that regulate circadian rhythm, temperature, hormones, and nervous system tone. After 60, sleep is less driven by fatigue alone and more by timing and internal readiness. The body needs to feel that the day had a clear beginning, middle, and end, and regular movement helps define that structure. When movement is consistent, the brain receives a strong signal that the body is engaged with the world in a predictable way. This predictability reinforces the internal clock, making it easier for sleep to arrive and deepen at the appropriate time. Gentle, daily movement influences circadian rhythm by increasing sensitivity to daytime signals. Walking, light strength work, stretching, or balance exercises expose the body to light, gravity, and muscular engagement, all of which help synchronize internal timing. This synchronization becomes increasingly important with age because the circadian system grows less flexible. Without consistent cues, sleep timing drifts, leading to early awakenings, late-night alertness, or fragmented rest. Movement acts as a reset mechanism, reminding the brain when daytime is meant to occur and when it should end. Body temperature regulation is another critical pathway through which movement improves sleep. Sleep initiation depends on a natural drop in core body temperature in the evening. During the day, movement raises temperature slightly and then allows it to fall more effectively later. Without adequate daytime activity, this temperature contrast is weaker, and the body struggles to transition into sleep. Movement does not need to be intense to achieve this effect. In fact, overly strenuous activity late in the day can delay the temperature drop and interfere with rest. The nervous system prefers movement that is steady and moderate, followed by sufficient time to cool down. Muscle engagement also plays a role in signaling sleep readiness. When muscles are used regularly, they communicate a sense of completion to the brain. The body feels that it has fulfilled its physical purpose for the day. This reduces restlessness at night. In contrast, long periods of inactivity can create a mismatch between energy availability and energy use. The body may feel tired but not satisfied, leading to a state where sleep feels elusive despite fatigue. Gentle movement resolves this mismatch by aligning physical demand with recovery. Consistency matters more than intensity. Sporadic bursts of activity do not provide the same benefit as daily, predictable movement. The aging nervous system values reliability. When movement occurs at roughly the same time each day, it becomes part of the body's expectation. This expectation helps regulate hormonal rhythms associated with alertness and rest. Over time, the body begins to anticipate sleep because it recognizes the pattern leading up to it. Movement also influences emotional regulation, which becomes increasingly important for sleep after 60. Physical activity helps metabolize stress hormones and promotes the release of calming neurochemicals. This does not require vigorous exercise. Even slow, mindful movement can reduce background stress and quiet mental activity. When emotional arousal is lower in the evening, the nervous system is more willing to release control and allow sleep to unfold. Balance and coordination activities provide additional benefits. They engage the brain in focused, purposeful ways that enhance neural communication. This type of engagement improves overall nervous system efficiency, reducing random alert signals at night. The brain feels more organized, less scattered. Sleep benefits from this internal order. Movement earlier in the day tends to be more effective than movement late at night. Morning or early afternoon activity strengthens circadian alignment and improves nighttime sleep quality. Late-night exercise, even if gentle, can sometimes stimulate alertness in older adults. The body's recovery window narrows with age, and it prefers physical demands to occur when daylight signals are present. Rest days are also important, but rest does not mean complete stillness. On lighter days, movement can be softer and shorter, but it should still exist. This continuity reassures the body that routines are intact. The nervous system relaxes when it knows what to expect. Sleep improves when the body trusts its daily rhythm. Movement interacts with other sleep-supporting factors such as digestion and blood sugar regulation. Regular physical activity improves insulin sensitivity, reducing nighttime blood sugar fluctuations that can trigger awakenings. It also supports digestion earlier in the day, minimizing discomfort at night. These effects work quietly but powerfully to create conditions where sleep is less interrupted. Importantly, movement after 60 should feel supportive, not punishing. Pain, excessive soreness, or exhaustion can have the opposite effect, keeping the nervous system alert and defensive. The body must interpret movement as beneficial rather than threatening. This interpretation depends on how the activity feels during and after. Enjoyment, comfort, and a sense of capability are strong signals of safety. When movement is approached with respect rather than urgency, it becomes a dialogue rather than a demand. The body responds by aligning its internal rhythms more smoothly. Sleep becomes less forced and more anticipated. The night feels like a natural continuation of the day rather than a struggle against wakefulness. Over time, consistent movement reshapes how the body experiences rest. Sleep may still be lighter than in youth, but it becomes more restorative. Awakenings may still occur, but returning to sleep becomes easier. The body feels more settled overall. Movement does not fix sleep directly. It prepares the system to accept sleep when it arrives. In this way, gentle, consistent physical activity becomes one of the most natural and effective ways to support sleep after 60, not by exhausting the body, but by reminding it that the day has been lived fully and that rest is now appropriate. Sleep after 60 is deeply influenced by how the body manages inflammation and metabolic balance, because both quietly shape how alert or relaxed the nervous system remains during the night. Low-grade inflammation becomes more common with age, not as a disease in itself, but as a reflection of accumulated stress, slower recovery, and subtle immune activation. This type of inflammation does not usually cause obvious symptoms during the day, but at night it can keep the body in a state of readiness. The immune system and nervous system are closely linked, and when immune signaling remains slightly elevated, the brain interprets this as unfinished business. Sleep becomes lighter, more fragmented, and more easily interrupted because the body does not feel fully settled. Inflammation acts like background noise. It does not shout, but it hums constantly, signaling that something requires monitoring. The aging brain, already more cautious, responds to this noise by maintaining alertness. This is why people may feel tired yet restless, or why they wake without a clear external reason. The body is responding to internal signals that suggest imbalance. Reducing this inflammatory noise does not require aggressive intervention. It requires creating conditions where the immune system feels supported rather than provoked. Metabolic balance plays a central role in this process. As metabolism changes with age, the body becomes less tolerant of large fluctuations in blood sugar, hydration, and nutrient timing. These fluctuations are interpreted as stress. A drop in blood sugar during the night can trigger a release of alertness hormones, waking the brain to restore balance. This awakening is protective, not disruptive by design. The body is prioritizing stability over continuous sleep. Regular, balanced meals during the day help prevent these nighttime disturbances. When the body trusts that energy availability is steady, it is less likely to activate emergency responses during sleep. Late-night eating, however, can create its own form of disruption by keeping digestion active when the body is preparing for rest. The nervous system must choose between processing food and allowing sleep to deepen. With age, this choice becomes more pronounced, and digestion often wins. Hydration also influences sleep quality. Mild dehydration increases physiological stress, subtly elevating heart rate and alertness. At the same time, excessive fluid intake close to bedtime can lead to awakenings. The body after 60 prefers moderation and timing. When hydration is consistent earlier in the day, the nervous system relaxes at night. Inflammation is also influenced by emotional and psychological factors. Chronic worry, unresolved tension, and loneliness all contribute to immune activation. The body does not separate emotional stress from physical threat. Both increase inflammatory signaling. This explains why emotional calm often leads to better sleep even when physical conditions remain unchanged. When the mind feels settled, the immune system follows. Evening routines that promote calm have a direct biological effect. Quiet activities, reduced stimulation, and gentle transitions signal to the body that vigilance is no longer required. This lowers inflammatory signaling and supports the natural drop in alertness hormones. The effect is cumulative. Night after night, these routines teach the body that evenings are safe. Inflammation is also affected by how the body is used during the day. Gentle movement reduces inflammatory markers by improving circulation, supporting immune regulation, and enhancing metabolic efficiency. Inactivity allows inflammatory signals to accumulate. Overexertion can provoke them. The balance lies in movement that feels restorative rather than depleting. Sleep itself is one of the body's primary tools for managing inflammation, which creates a feedback loop. Poor sleep increases inflammation, and increased inflammation worsens sleep. Breaking this loop requires addressing the conditions that allow the body to rest rather than focusing solely on sleep duration. When the body begins to sleep more consistently, inflammation gradually decreases, further improving rest. Nutrition quality influences inflammation quietly but persistently. Diets that support stable energy and reduce digestive stress help the immune system remain calm. This does not require perfection. It requires consistency and moderation. The body after 60 responds poorly to extremes but well to steady nourishment. Metabolic balance also involves timing. Regular wake times, consistent meal schedules, and predictable activity patterns reduce internal confusion. The body thrives on rhythm. Rhythm reduces inflammation by reducing uncertainty. When the body knows what comes next, it does not need to stay alert. Sleep improves when the body feels internally coherent. When digestion, immune activity, hormones, and nervous system signals align, the brain feels safe enough to release control. Sleep becomes less about effort and more about permission. It may not return to the depth of youth, but it becomes more restorative because it is no longer constantly interrupted by internal alarms. Improving sleep after 60 is therefore not about chasing sleep itself, but about creating biological calm. When inflammation quiets and metabolism stabilizes, sleep follows naturally. The body does not need to be forced into rest. It needs to feel that nothing urgent remains. When that feeling becomes familiar, night after night, sleep unfolds as a reflection of balance rather than a battle to be won.